half a second. Welcome everyone to Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion with Every Business HR and Insurance HR as well. We have two wonderful ladies that are going to be presenting, and we're very excited to have you all here. Right now, we are going to start with introductions. So I'd like to start with Leo. It's just going to be a quick name and company.
Hi, I'm Leo Vagoda, and I run Anpolis LLC, and I'm also chairing a Code of Conduct task force for a conference I've been involved in, so I have a particular interest in this session.
Fantastic. Thank you, Leo. Renee?
Oh, good morning, Renee. I carry on Gold Line Insurance and Finance School. I just come here for furthering my education.
Wonderful. Thank you, Renee. Sherry?
Hi, I'm Sherry Benjamins, friend of Sonia Kemp. Have my own business in Long Beach.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you for joining us. Tracy McHugh and then Tracy Cox.
I am Tracy. I'm the event sales manager with Industrious in the Culver City, Playa Vista area.
Fantastic. Tracy Cox.
Hi everyone, I'm Tracy Cox. I am your independent wine rep with One Hope Wine.
Fantastic. Andreas?
Hi, I'm Andres Nunez with Every Business HR Essentials. So I'm here with Sonia, Noel, and Andrea.
Great, thanks Andreas.
Thank
Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle Kawamoto-Perry with the Forward Project, and we do leadership development and mindset training.
Wonderful, thank you, Michelle. Noel?
Hi, my name is Noel. I'm with Every Business HR Essentials. I'm an intern, and I'm here with Sonia, Andrea, and Andreas.
Perfect, thank you so much. And Dima?
Hi, I'm Dima. I work with Parsons, and we're currently working with the client, which is Lava, on the automated people's movers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and thanks for joining us. Christina?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christina Davis. I'm the president and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. It's so nice to see you. I'm here on a very important issue that's going to affect our business community. I appreciate our presenters for taking the time to inform us, and I appreciate all of you for taking the time to learn about this very critical issue.
And I am Kelly Trombley. I'm with the LAX Coastal Chamber, and I'm so happy to have all of you here. And without further ado, we are going to go into Andrea. Introduce yourself, and then please take over.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Trent, HR business partner with Every Business HR Essentials. And I'd like to introduce our presenters. We have Marguerite Ulrich, the founder of Inspire HR Consulting, who has more than 30 years of experience with national and global initiatives. Among other roles, she was the executive sponsor for the Diversity and Inclusion Initiatives for Veolia North America and UK Ireland. She's externally recognized nationally and internationally as a diversity and inclusion expert through publications in numerous HR magazines and articles, as well as a frequent speaker and expert panel member on this important topic. Also presenting is Sonia Kemp, the founder and CEO of Every Business HR Essentials. And she also has more than 30 years experience spanning all areas of human resources, from generalist to executive leadership for Fortune 500, privately held, nonprofit, and high growth organizations. Sonia's recent one-on-one coaching and intensive group sessions on diversity, inclusivity, and belonging demonstrates her ability to unify divergent views and open up space for conversations which enhance understanding and ultimately greater acceptance. Please welcome Marguerite Ulrich and Sonia Kemp.
Yay!
Hello. Hi.
Great introduction. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
you,
you.
Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. We appreciate that. And welcome to all of you. You mentioned, Kelly, early about good news. And so I'll just say a couple of good news things is this is our first presentation with the LAX Chamber as new members. So thank you. We're really happy to be here.
We're happy to have you.
I'm going to go up and share my screen and cross my fingers that it's the right one. and you'll keep me honest.
Perfect.
It's there, Sonia.
All right, we got it. So things are already going well. All right, so we'll take it from there. So Marguerite and I today will be alternating. I'll be controlling the slides as we open up the conversation around the future of diversity, equality, inclusivity, and belonging. As you all know, we have a really great confluence happening in our country right now. We have the the changing demographic of the U.S. Landscape. We expect to be by 2050 a country that is a majority minority country population wise. If you juxtapose that with our workforces, all of the organizations that were mentioned in the introductions, you will see that we have 1 in 3 workers today are millennials, and that continues to grow. Mm-hmm. We expect that by 2030, 70% of the workforce will be comprised of millennials. When you take that in concert with recent events nationally, we now see that the imperative around diversity, equality, inclusivity, and belonging is at the forefront. And so today, what Marguerite and I will be talking to you about is how in your business, you as leaders and others in your organizations can take steps to understand where you are today on these issues, and also what tools you can use to advance on the continuum so you can achieve better results. I'll say first, when we really think about diversity, inclusion, moving the slide here, when we think about diversity, equality, inclusivity, and belonging, we really have to know that we are better together. But there's lots of evidence that that happens. Sometimes people think diversity is really a social imperative, but it's a business imperative. If you look at organizations like Intel that have put in place diversity in its very core, they've experienced incredible bottom line results. And organizationally, retention is up across all areas of diversity. So we are better together, not because we are doing social initiatives, but because we are doing business imperatives. And businesses will see the fruit of taking a more aggressive approach toward diversity initiatives. So today, before we get into our content, we'd like to do a 4-question poll and hear from you all. So Kelly's going to help us with our first poll on Zoom. So we will show those questions in the chat. We'll ask you to read the question, respond, and we will show those on the screen immediately. So Kelly. Now, I can't see them in the chat myself.
That is okay. I'm watching it go up. I have 6 responses,
Great.
7. We're
Great.
getting there.
Okay.
All right. I have just a couple more people if they want to respond, and then we're going to take this one down. 2, 6. Perfect. And this is our results. We have 2 people who said racism, and we have 6 people who said implicit bias.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
And
we're jotting those down.
Are you ready for the second one?
Yes, we're ready for the second one.
Perfect. All right. We're launching right now. Give you about 30 seconds to answer. Got a couple more people to answer. Give it just a second longer. All right. We have 5 people who said 63%. We have 2 who said 22%. Oh, said 78%, sorry. And 2 people who said 98%.
Okay. Okay.
Awesome. We're going to end this one and go to the next one. All right. Give you about 30 seconds. It's fun watching the poll go up. All right, I'm going to give you another 5 seconds. Have a couple more people that might want to respond. All right, we're ready to end this poll. I have 1 person who said our culture, 7 people who said life experience, and 1 person who said media.
Okay, all right, great. Interesting. Thank you. Thank you for participating.
Oh, wait, we have one more.
Oh, that's right. One more question.
All right, 1 more, and then we are good to go. This one might take a couple seconds longer, so
yeah.
you have to read. Sorry, kids.
On a Friday, no less.
I know. Give you another about 15 seconds. All right, I'm waiting another couple seconds and then we will share the poll results. Ending polling now. And we have 8 who said the first one influences how we treat, and 1 who said it predicts it can perpetrate disparities.
Okay.
We are done with the poll. Yay, that was fun.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that.
Yeah. We're going to go to the next slide. Yeah, Sonia? And we'll share the answers at the end.
Yes.
Because what we know we'll cover during the presentation will give you some potentially more answers to those poll questions. So sorry about that. We'll do it right at the end. So we thought this was a really good way to kick it off as well. I really love this pyramid. I am DISC certified, so there's different kinds of DISC. How many of you have actually done DISC? If you want to raise your hands, you know, okay, so a few of you have, okay. And Leo, you have as well. Okay, great. And for DISC, really, that's more of the what with regards to your characteristics and behaviors. So the D stands for dominance, I is influence, S is steadiness, and sometimes C, they say correctness or conscientiousness. So those are the DISC with regards. But extended DISC is more about the how. And this one's really important because what we're trying to look at is behaviors. But let's start at the bottom of the pyramid. So you see the word culture there, and what does that mean? It means a lot of things, actually. So the culture could actually start with your own, I'll say, cultural norms, and that's what from your family system, friends, but it could also mean company culture. And for some of you, you might have been in other countries like myself, it could be country cultural differences. So that's kind of the foundation. Extended DISC doesn't measure that. That's actually coming directly from the individual and what their, I'll say, experiences are with regards to their cultural heritage, company culture, and country culture. What DISC does measure is your natural style. So this is where your unconscious behavior, this is the one that you're most comfortable in. It takes the least amount of energy. And through the assessment, they call it profile 2. So you actually have that come out of your assessment that we would do. And then you get into the blue section. This is more of your behavioral filters. So this is more about your experience. This might be about different skills that you have, because some of you in various roles at your organization, different attitudes that you might have. Extended DISC does not measure that piece. That comes in through your own experiences. But it does measure the conscious behavior. And this is the one that you actually adapt to depending on your work environment. So some of you that have done DISC before, you might find that your style might change because it depends on the work environment that you're in. And this one is actually less comfortable for you. It takes more energy because you are adapting, and it's more of, I'll say, a learned behavior versus your unconscious behavior is more of your natural style. So I always like to look at this because it kind of just lays a nice framework as we work with different companies and clients with regards to how do you measure this? And this is a good way to do that. So this is the conscious, unconscious bias. But then when we go to the next slide, I'm going to go back to Sonia. There's actually we call the origin with regards to biases. And Sonia's going to touch on that before we cover some other models.
Great, thanks. So, when you see the word bias, I can imagine that you all have a bias against the word itself. It's hard for us as humans to really acknowledge that we have biases, but it really is part of the human condition. So what I'm going to touch on is really, first and foremost, what is bias? It's either a preference toward something, someone, some group, or an aversion toward, right? So you either prefer it or you do not. But bias in and of itself, the origin of it is really neutral. It really comes out of efficiency. When our brains have to take in millions of pieces of data at any given time. So as you think right now, as you sit in your office, some of you I see are enjoying maybe a beverage. Some of you are sitting on maybe a more comfortable sofa. Some of you are sitting in maybe not so comfortable desk chairs, but your brain is taking in all that information at once. What is the temperature? What is the brightness of the sunlight coming through the window? Are there noises coming outside? Your brain takes in all that information. And psychologists say that our brains take in 11 million bits of data at any given time. Now, how on earth can a brain take that much information and distill it down to allow us to operate? Well, our brains are amazing. Our brains take that 11 million bits of data and synchronize it down to 40 to 50 bits of data. How can we do it? That actually is where bias comes in, because our brains take all of our experiences, our perceptions, all of our own personal biases, our experiences, our media exposure, and distill these shortcuts so we can cut through the 11 million and quickly make decisions and operate in the world. While that's a good thing, showing incredible efficiency, it can also be a bad thing, because when you utilize your perceptions, experiences, those filters ultimately become the perceptions you hold, and therefore you use those to make decisions. And many times those decisions reflect your biases. So when Marguerite touched on unconscious bias, we now delve into the concept of, if my brain has these shortcuts and it uses those pathways to automatically reach incorrect outcomes, unconsciously, I use those again and again in my decision making. And in our workplace, that can be on the people I hire, on the people I don't promote, on the on the ideas that I welcome, on the ones that I don't value. So ultimately, this concept of bias that we all share as humans really requires us to challenge ourselves, knowing that we all intuitively come from that same place and are all victims of our own perceptions. We just need to be aware in how those shape the actions that we ultimately decide in our organizations. So I will turn it to Marguerite to talk about how organizations can look at ways to dispel those pathways.
Yeah, and there's some great assessments associated with those two previous slides that we looked at. So then you can actually see in a report where the unconscious, conscious biases are, and also the implicit bias, because it does play into this slide that we're showing you now. So as you look at this continuum for a diversity, inclusion, cultures, you can see it goes really more from a compliance, I'll say, related culture, all the way up to a collaborative, inclusive culture. So we work with clients and say to them, where do you think you are? So we're going to ask you, As you read those different definitions, if you could put in the chat for us, where do you think your organization might be more on the compliance side or closer to the collaborative inclusive? So we'll give you a couple of seconds to read those. And I can see some coming in some of the chats. Thank you for that. Oh, Sonia, one more back for us. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, singular, okay? And that's a good one. I should have said that more because there are some independents. I did a little research on you, on all of you. Some of you are independents. So, right on for the entrepreneurs out there. So you are more singular, you're right. All the way up into, I'll say, the inclusive. So I say inclusive, collaborative, nice, nice. More compliance, okay, great. Okay, singular, okay. Probably compliant, collaborative, good. Really helpful, thank you for that. That was just kind of a quick thing, but we actually survey various stakeholder groups because I'm sure you're not going to be surprised. You might get different responses from, I'll say, executives in the C-suite to other employees within the organization. And Sonia and I have a pretty good example of that, of a recent client that we worked with where they actually surveyed the employees, and the executive team was really surprised by the responses that came back from that. So, it's always different where your perspective is, where your worldview is with regards to where the company's at. And sometimes, obviously, the higher up in the organization you are, the more influence you have over decisions that are made. So of course you might think that things are probably looking okay. That organization now is really evaluating what they do next because there were some surprises there with regards to the culture and where they actually stood. So that's kind of one that we do, and you do it with the different stakeholder groups, and then you talk about it. And I think the conversation is so important as you go through that, is to actually have the conversation on how can you think it's more collaborative or more about compliance or whatever it might be. And then we ask, where would you like it to be in the next year? Where would you like it to be in the next 3 years? And where would you like it to be in the next 5 years? Because that's also important too. You can't go from singular maybe right to inclusive. It might be some steps that you need to take. So we really work with them and say, okay, at least you know where you stand. Now let's build on that. So Sonia, let's go to the next slide. So that's a little bit about cultures. This one, Sonia and I talked quite a bit about this because we're trying to pick, I'll say, the most simple cultural competence continuum. There's so many of them out there. There's Dr. Livermore, there's David Thompson, there's all these various, I'll say, kind of the science behind cultural competence. If any of you have heard of emotional intelligence, it kind of works along with emotional intelligence. Is now organizations are starting to measure cultural competence. Where might you be with regards to your cultures? Are you more on the cultural biased, or are you more of a cultural intelligence? And this is a simpler, and I think we shared the presentation, Kelly, if I'm correct. So we're happy to share some of this information so you can see this. But this is, I'll say, a simpler version. There are other ones out there where you can actually assess where do you think you might be. And often we use this with the leaders. So we kind of really look at and say, how inclusive of a leader are you with regards to your culture? And where do you think you might be on this continuum? It definitely takes time. Anybody that's been involved in any change management or cultural transformation work, it takes years. It doesn't happen overnight. And that's why we think from a diversity inclusion standpoint, it is more of a cultural shift. It's not a one initiative and done, because then it's not done. You really do need to look, and somebody mentioned earlier about having it embedded. It really needs to be embedded in your culture. So this is, I'll say, a simpler model that we like to use to really measure where do you think you stand with regards to leaders. So there's one organization we're working with that will actually use this with, because they have a cultural committee and they have a person who heads up D&I. And they're coming from two different places. And I'm starting to see now in organizations that they actually have culture, diversity, inclusion, I'll say directors. They're starting to see that the role is probably about culture and D&I and making that part of it. And to Sonia's earlier point, it's a business imperative and you're able to measure that. So that's
Marguerite,
cultural
if I could
competence. Yeah, yeah.
Marguerite,
So
if I could just jump in, I mean, an example is Intel. What they were saying, they've done such a great job of integrating it and culture into diversity initiatives.
Yes.
What they realize is a lot of organizations will focus prematurely on hiring diverse individuals, right? They will hire and be really proud of the numbers that they secure in hiring. But ultimately, where these initiatives fail is on the retention and the development throughout. So you might hire very diverse individuals, differently abled, from different racial groups, different sexual orientation, but ultimately you have no retention. And so when it comes to really diversity, equality, inclusivity, and belonging, it's, are folks going to stay? Not just are they going to arrive? Are they going to stay, and do they feel that they are able to exemplify who they are fully in your workplace? And that's what cultural competence is, and developing that level of awareness in your organization and ultimately throughout your leadership.
Yeah. So I would say we would tend to, this would be at the leadership point, level in the organization, because, they have to lead by example with regards to what is the culture. And there's some questions that we're going to share in a little bit that will actually help as you try to measure. There's so many different ways you can measure it. As Sonia mentioned, you can do more what we call the different diversity dimensions. But if you really want to make it more embedded in your culture, you need to look at other, I'll say, kind of KPIs with regards to diversity inclusion in your cultures. So can we move on to the next one, Sonia? I think if I was with a lot of HR, OD type people, I know we got a mixture of you out there. Many of you have probably seen this. This is a global index. So I use this in the UK as well as in the US. And it is a great way to measure where you're at level-wise. So if you look to the left of it, it's really looking at regulatory compliance. You can see that. I know it's small font, sorry about that. And then as the arrow works up, it goes to cultural change. Because it does, this is once again reiterating the importance of the culture piece. And then as you go across the different levels, you can see D&I enhances our competitive advantage. So once you move more to the level 5, I'll say, you really are leveraging people's differences for innovative growth, and it will make sure you're more competitive. And there's so many studies out there with regards to improving financial, I can see Michelle nodding her head, financial performance, I mean, you name it, they realize that. And that is also placed to what Sonia mentioned with regards to retention. That also means that you'll end up retaining these talented people that you really need from a competitive advantage standpoint. This is another great one as well. We have worked with people that maybe are in the awareness area, but they haven't embedded it or integrated into policies and procedures. We'll use the candidate as an example, Sonia, that you mentioned too. Somebody's interested in working in your organization. What are some of the first things that they do? They go to your website. They go to Glassdoor. I mean, they go to other sources to really get information about you. And I went to your websites too, to kind of check it out. And people are looking to make sure there are people who look like me in those. They want to make sure that there is more about diversity and inclusion and that it's stated in their values. A lot of companies put values with regards to that in their websites. And then when they're actually in the interviewing process, they also want to make sure that's integrated in the interviewing. How do you do interviews? Is it a panel of people interviewing? Is it just one person? Are there diverse people on the panel? I mean, there's so many different ways that people see it, as well as, I'll say, feel it with regards to opportunities in an organization. So once again, we ask, where do you want to be in the next year, 3 years, 5 years? Where do you think you are? And it's okay where you are. It's just recognizing that and then putting in initiatives that work for your organization. They're going to be different for everybody. You can't do the same thing, cookie cutter approach, because everyone's different. We know that. So the goal is to get to level 5 at the sustainable. And like I said, this is a global index used worldwide. So it's one I think is really valuable for people. And we really want to encourage businesses to move from level 1 to level 5 so they can create a culture that embraces diversity as a source of competitive advantage. So that's really the approach of this one. Sonia, I think we go to the next slide, right?
Yes.
I'm watching the time there, Kelly, making sure that we stay on time and that we have time to give you the answers to the polls.
Yes.
So sense of belonging, this is a newer term now. I've been doing this for 30 plus years, maybe 35, but you know, my very first job in this was more on the compliance side, and that was many, many, many years ago. It really has evolved, I'll say, this part of the profession. I've done a lot of different things in HR. And you'll probably start to see more articles, if you want to read and learn more about this, around a concept of sense of belonging. Not just so much about, I'll say, diversity, inclusion, and equality, and I'll say equity, because that's another piece too, is making sure you're paying people fairly. Doesn't matter, it's the roles they're in, not so much their background. So these are some great questions. I'm not going to read all of them, but I always like, am I able to bring my whole self to work? That's a really powerful one. The other one is, do I feel that I belong here? This is kind of the retention piece that Sonia talked about. You can do all the bells and whistles up front to attract this talent in, but once they're there, you got to make sure these things are in play because they're not going to stay. So you really need to make sure that you got this covered in those different models that we just shared with you. And the last one I always like, and this is always a good one, I plan on staying with this organization in the next 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years. So that gives you a sense of the retention, and depending on how you do the demographics piece of it, it gives you some really good information. So that's another concept around sense of belonging. So I think we move to the next slide, Sonia, and we give you the answers to the poll.
Yes.
Okay, and then we open it up for questions. And I think that puts us right on schedule here. So we'll give you enough time to ask questions. So, okay, for the first one was around unconscious assumptions we make about others are based on their identity labels is called what? And I think if I remember correctly, 6 of you said implicit bias. That is correct. It is B, implicit bias. Now, maybe since you've gone through this presentation, you might change your answer to B. So it is implicit bias. That's the answer. Question number 2. What percentage of thinking in our subconscious mind, which Sonia covered the origin of biases, where we collect and store implicit biases? The answer is actually 98%. So there were a couple of you out there that said that. It's significant. So you can see how that could play out in an organization, or if you're an entrepreneur on your own, you have to be able to be self-aware of any, and as you're working with different organizations. Really, really interesting. Number 3, our personal biases can be shaped by, and we had 1 culture, 7 life experience, and 1 the media. sorry, this was a trick one, and it's probably not fair. It's all of those. So you're all right on that. So bravo, nice job on that. But it is all, we didn't give you an answer of that because, you know, we wanted to make you think. It's on a Friday. It's really Friday afternoon for me because I'm 3 hours later than you. So that's that one. Then the last one, how does implicit bias matter? And there were a lot of good ones there. So we had 8 in A, and one was the predictive, or maybe B, I think it was B, sorry. Once again, it's all of those. So that's why does implicit bias matter, okay? So we'll give you the answers to them so you can go in and use them with your colleagues, or for those on your own, talk to other people about it, because it really is a way to kind of expand people's perspectives with regards to implicit bias, conscious, unconscious bias. So that's the answers to the poll. So with that, we're going to go to the next slide, and we're just going to open up for questions you might have.
Is that the slide you were looking for?
Yeah, that's good, Sonia.
Okay. So great.
And Kelly, they might be in the chat.
Yeah, there's some in the chat, I believe.
Okay, good. All right. He's filtering. Okay, I have a question. Okay, Leo, could you please expand on how to understand invisible diversity?
Can I talk about that one?
Yeah,
Valerie?
of course, Sonia. That's a good
Sure.
one for you.
And
Right.
Sonia, I think everybody has your information. We can also put it in the chat if you want. So let's take down the slide so that we can all
Sure.
kind of talk together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great
Sure.
idea, Kelly.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. So when we talk about invisible diversity, you know, there are obviously those diversity can many times be referred to as immutable characteristics, right? So as you look at me on the screen, I have immutable characteristics. I'm obviously a Black woman. You can see that on the screen, but I also have immutable I also have other characteristics that might be invisible. It might be, I might have a learning disability. I might have another form of diversity. Maybe my sexual orientation might not be visible. So diversity is broad, and you know, we embrace all of those when we talk about diversity these days, and really looking at expanding our view of not just the immutable characteristics.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add to that. I mean, many of you probably know the whole concept of an iceberg. So to Sonia's point, there's things, and based on your question, Leo, the things that you can actually see above the ice, and then what you cannot see under the ice. And sometimes they call them more of like secondary dimensions to an individual. So that could be status, where they're from. I mean, there's so many different things that you don't visibly see. And it's really important that we respect and celebrate all those differences of what we can see, I'll say, below the ice, not just above the ice. So great question, Leo. Thank you for breaking the ice for us.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. We have, I see C-suite executives know about these studies, but it doesn't always move them to make changes. Sonia, why don't we start? Because we were talking about this earlier today. I'm going to have you start with that one, and I'm happy to add.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, Michelle, I mean, we've all been there, right?
Yeah.
You know, the data's there and it's clear as day, and we don't see it with our executives. But you know, some of the ways that you can start small is looking at your retention, looking at information about your engagement surveys. Are people that your organization is spending lots of dollars to recruit? Are they staying with the organization? Are they thriving? You know, do we have that situation where we have diverse talent, but they're not moving ahead in the organization? So do your own internal polling of results and be able to share that with your executives. And then the most important and powerful one is, as we all, it's hard to remember what happened before March, but before the pandemic, we were in a fight for talent everywhere at every level. And that will return. And when it does, those companies that are offering opportunities to diverse talent will definitely have the advantage if organizations aren't looking to be more inclusive.
Yeah, and all I will add to that, and that was excellent response, Sonia, is that when we have worked with them, Michelle, the C-suite, some of it, we shared this earlier example where the C-suite was extremely surprised from the feedback of a survey conducted because they thought everything was hunky-dory. You know, there was no issues in the culture. And it was a real eye-opener that they really had, they weren't ready for Sonia and I yet.
No.
You know, they needed to take care of some other business first before bringing us in to move them in that continuum, because they just were not quite there. Now, there's another place we're working with. Like I said, they have this cultural committee, they have a head of D&I. They have support from the C-suite, but it'll be really fascinating when we, I'll say, survey them to find out where they think they sit on those various models that we shared with you, and where do they think they really want to go, because they're realizing exactly what Sonia said. They got to remain competitive, and they know it's going to be really difficult going forward. I mean, we were talking about, there's less people that we're going to be able to choose from, and they're a high-tech kind of company. So they're really going to be, I'll say, fighting for talent. So they recognize that there could be some concerns there if they don't do something now. And they've been doing something for the last 2 years. So we know that it's in the making. We just might need to put a bow on it and help them, get to level 5 in that diversity inclusion maturity matrix. So, but yeah, the C-suite, I think if you make it more about the business, and that's why I like using the word more cultural shift. I used it quite a bit in the UK, that it was a cultural transformation, not a D&I transformation. Because once they hear that, they think HR and, oh goodness, what are we gonna have to do here? And they immediately go to what Leo's question was. They look at the visible dimensions of diversity and go right there. And we're like, no, that's not where we're going. We really do want to leverage people's differences because it's going to make a financial difference in the organization. And we were able to track that. So that was tricky, but it was really important to show it is about the culture and not about, I'll say, the D&I piece. So great question. Thank you for that.
So
Any other questions?
Does anybody else have any other questions before we move on?
It's like Leo's hands raised.
Leo, go ahead.
So I do have one other question, which is, could you talk a little bit about the kinds of activities that can be used to start a cultural transformation, especially when the organization is geographically highly diverse and only is able to meet face-to-face very occasionally, even at the best of times. And obviously right now, that's going to be very rare anyway.
Yeah. Sonia, I'll go to you and then I'll add.
Sure. Well, we're actually working with a client that has the same situation. I don't know how, when you mentioned how diverse it is geographically, but this organization is almost exclusively virtual all the time.
All the time.
That has its own built-in challenges, you can imagine, because folks get together possibly once a year, if at all. So, the challenges there, as Marguerite talked about, DISC, are not just, as she talked about, what's above the iceberg. It is, what people's natural style is, their style that is their secondary style, as well as, our own biases that comes to play. So ultimately, to start that conversation, I would think we would want to survey and to get information about what folks believe, are the key issues in the organization, and start from there. But really try to level set, come to an understanding of where we think we're starting from, and then we can chart the path for how we move forward, to bring folks in alignment with where we're starting from.
Yeah, and Leo, what I'll add to that is there's one other organization that we're working with, and I used to work for them, is they put together a diversity committee, a diversity inclusion committee. And these are people who are very, very passionate about moving the organization to a level 5 in all of those models, you know, to the greatest degree. And they've asked more for, I'll say, advising and coaching them, because they have, I'll say, more than a full-time job that they're doing for the organization, but at the same time, they take pride in the company culture and the whole sense of belonging, and they really want to be able to, I'll say, influence how that's going to look for the future, not just for themselves, but for the next generation of talent, because they are about sustainability as an organizational, I'll say, mission, but they want sustainability from a people side too. So they really just need some rounding off of, I'll tell you what their 3 subcommittees are, which I think are really interesting. One is around recruiting. So they found that they needed to do something there. One is around hiring. They don't think that they've been diverse enough with their hiring practices. And the third one is around mentoring, which is really interesting as well. And this gets to more of the people who are already in the organization, that they want to be able to identify mentors and mentees within the organization to help move, I'll say, the diverse talent that's already there. They've recognized they have diversity in the company. Let's not lose it. Let's do something about it. And so they have these 3 subcommittees. So we're working with them on the DISC and the implicit, so then they can be more aware of their own biases and also be able to appreciate the differences on this committee, and to be able to have not be, I'll say, a barrier to some great, we know, some great initiatives that they're going to come up with that will better suit that organizational culture that probably Sonia and I could never dream of, because they live in that environment day in and day out. So it's really wonderful question. I think there's so many ways to get to where people's, I'll say, goals are. It's just, you know, recognizing those biases really is the bottom line of it, really. Yeah. So great question. Thank you, Leo.
Fantastic. Well, we are getting near the end of our time. Sonia, Marguerite, Andrea, I want to thank you all for, you know, putting this together, helping us, answering our questions, and letting us know some of the things that we may not have known or may not have figured out. It's so great to continue to learn. Like you said, things that we don't necessarily know that are in the background of our brains. So that's fantastic. I just wanted to close this out. Oh, go ahead, Marguerite.
No, I said it was our pleasure to be part of it. I think Sonia and I are so passionate about this. Any learning that you have that you can pay it forward, as I always say, makes us very happy. So thank you for your time.
Yes,
thank you for your time. We definitely appreciate it. Sonia and Marguerite's information is in the chat. If you want to copy the chat, you can go to the 3 dots at the bottom right-hand side of your screen, and it has a save chat area. And then Christina, do you want to add anything and close us out?
I just want to say how spectacular I thought your presentation was. So thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I am incredibly passionate about this issue, and I definitely want our chamber to embrace and move this needle forward as far as we can in supporting our business community, because the first step is educating yourself on what is happening. And so this was fantastic. I also feel that this is ongoing. This doesn't stop. It doesn't just like, oh, we've reached enlightenment, now we get to stop. We need to continue our efforts. So I hope that we can bring you back again.
We would love to.
And we'll find a way. And I know that we're doing a leadership 2.0. I think that talking about this and would be excellent. So I would love to connect with you guys again and continue to move this ball forward, because like I said, it doesn't stop here. We have to continue to educate and pay forward, as you said. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. We really